The phone rings at 2:47 in the morning. Hit Factory Studios, 6th floor, Manhattan, March 1996. Tuesday bleeding into Wednesday. The kind of hour when the city outside stops pretending and shows you what it really is. Biggie Smalls sits in the producer's chair, headphones around his neck, a half-finished Heineken sweating on the mixing board. The studio smells like cigarette smoke and leather and that particular staleness that comes from recycled air and bodies that haven't seen daylight in 14 hours. Puffy's gone home 2 hours ago. The engineer, a kid named Marcus who just turned 23 last week, is adjusting levels on a track they've been working since 9 p.m. 3 other guys from the crew are sprawled on the leather couch against the back wall, half asleep, waiting. The phone on the desk rings. Not Biggie's cell. The studio landline. The one that almost never rings because almost nobody has the number. Marcus looks up from the board. Biggie stares at the phone for 3 rings. 4. On the 5th ring, he reaches over and picks up the receiver. Doesn't say hello, just lifts it to his ear and waits. And then Tupac Shakur's voice comes through the line, and Biggie Smalls doesn't say a single word for the next 3 minutes and 17 seconds. To understand what happened in that studio at 2:47 a.m., you need to understand where Biggie was in March 1996. Not physically, mentally. The Ready to Die album had made him a king. The critics loved him. The streets loved him. Bad Boy Records was printing money. He was 23 years old, 340 pounds, and the best rapper alive. Nobody was close. Not even close. He'd taken Brooklyn and made it the center of the hip-hop universe. He'd taken his mother's basement and turned it into an empire. He'd taken Christopher Wallace, the kid who sold crack on Fulton Street, and transformed him into the notorious B.I.G., a name that meant something everywhere that mattered. But empires have a cost. And in March 1996, Biggie was starting to count that cost in ways he couldn't explain to anyone. Not to Puffy, not to his crew, not even to himself most nights. The East Coast-West Coast beef wasn't music anymore. It had stopped being about records and radio play and magazine covers sometime around November 95. Now it was about something darker. Something that lived in the space between threats and action, between words and violence, between ego and survival. Tupac had been shot 5 times in the lobby of Quad Recording Studios in November 94. He'd survived. Barely. And he decided, without any evidence, without any proof, that Biggie knew it was coming. That Biggie had set him up. That Biggie wanted him dead. Nothing Biggie said mattered after that. Tupac's mind was made up. And when Tupac Shakur's mind was made up, the universe bent around that decision until it became the only reality that existed. The studio that night was quiet before the phone rang. They'd been working on a track for the Life After Death sessions. Something slower. Something that felt like 3 a.m. music. Biggie had been in a strange mood all night. Not angry, not sad, just distant, like part of him was somewhere else. Marcus had noticed it. The way Biggie kept staring at nothing between takes. The way he'd light a cigarette, take 2 drags, and let it burn down to the filter without smoking it. The way he'd nod at something someone said without actually hearing the words. Something was off, but nobody asked. You didn't ask Biggie questions he didn't want to answer. When the phone rang, Marcus saw Biggie's hand stop halfway to his beer. Just for a second. A hesitation so brief you'd miss it if you weren't watching. Then Biggie picked up the receiver, held it to his ear, and went completely still. The 3 guys on the couch sat up slightly. Something in the room changed. The air pressure dropped. Marcus's hand hovered over the mixing board, but he didn't touch anything. Everyone was watching Biggie now, watching his face, watching for a reaction. But there was nothing. No expression, no movement. Just Biggie sitting there with the phone pressed to his ear, staring at the wall, breathing. Then they heard it. Faint, bleeding through the receiver. A voice. Angry. Loud enough that even from 6 feet away, Marcus could make out the tone if not the words. Harsh, aggressive, attacking. And they knew. Before anyone said anything, before any confirmation, they knew. It was Tupac. It had to be Tupac, because only one voice in the world could make Biggie go that still, that quiet, that unreachable. Tupac was yelling, not talking, yelling. The words came through the phone like bullets, fast, violent, designed to wound. Marcus couldn't make out every word, but he caught pieces, caught the anger, caught the accusations. Traitor, snake, fake, Judas, dead man, the usual insults. But something about the delivery was different tonight. Something more desperate, more personal, more final. This wasn't a diss track. This wasn't performance. This was Tupac Shakur, calling from somewhere on the West Coast at 3 in the morning New York time, which meant midnight in California, calling to say things that couldn't wait until morning. calling to say things he needed Biggie to hear right now, right this second, before something happened that couldn't be taken back. And Biggie said nothing, didn't interrupt, didn't defend himself, didn't argue, didn't curse back, just sat there with the phone against his ear, listening. His right hand rested on the mixing board. His fingers didn't move. His chest rose and fell slowly. Controlled breathing, the kind of breathing you do when you're trying not to react, when you're trying to stay in control of something that's slipping away. Marcus watched those fingers, watched them not move, watched them not tap, not fidget, not clench, just resting there on the metal surface like they were carved from wood. One of the guys on the couch whispered something. Marcus shot him a look that said shut up. The guy shut up. The only sound in the studio was Tupac's voice, distant and distorted through the phone speaker, and Biggie's breathing. Slow, even, mechanical. The yelling on the other end got louder, more intense. Tupac was saying something about death row, something about Suge Knight, something about Biggie's name being on a list, something about West Coast love and East Coast snakes and how everything that's coming is deserved, how Biggie made his choice, how there's no going back now, how this ends only one way. And still, Biggie said nothing. Marcus glanced at the clock. 1 minute, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. How long could someone listen to that without responding? How long could you let someone attack you without defending yourself? The silence from Biggie was louder than any words could have been. It was aggressive in its absence. It was an answer without being an answer. It said, I'm listening. I hear you. I'm not fighting back. I'm letting you get this out. I'm letting you burn yourself out against me because fighting you would be pointless. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, something changed in Tupac's voice. The anger cracked. Just for a second. Just long enough for something else to bleed through. Something that sounded like hurt, like betrayal, like the voice of someone who'd lost something they couldn't name. And that's when one of the guys on the couch saw it. Saw Biggie's jaw tighten. Just slightly. Just enough. The first physical reaction since he'd picked up the phone. His jaw clenched. His eyes closed. For maybe 3 seconds. Then opened again. Back to the wall. Back to nothing. Tupac was asking a question now. Marcus could hear the shift. The tone changed from accusation to interrogation. Why'd you do it, Big? Why'd you do it? Over and over. Why'd you do it? And Biggie still didn't answer. Didn't defend. Didn't explain. Just listened. Just took it. The question repeated. Became a chant. Became something almost desperate. And then Tupac said something else. Something quieter. Something Marcus couldn't hear. But whatever it was made Biggie's eyes change. The deadness in them shifted. Became something heavier. Something sadder. At 3 minutes and 10 seconds, Tupac stopped talking. There was silence on both ends. Complete silence. Biggie with the phone to his ear. Tupac on the other end. Neither saying anything. Just breathing. Just existing in the same moment across 3,000 miles. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Marcus's hand was shaking over the board. He realized he'd been holding his breath. He exhaled slowly. One of the guys on the couch shifted. The leather creaked. The sound was obscenely loud in the dead air. Then Tupac spoke again. Quieter now. Just 4 words. Marcus heard them clearly this time because they came through the phone like a whisper that filled the whole room. You already dead, Big. Not a threat. Not a prediction. A statement. A fact. An observation about something that had already happened. Present tense. You already dead. Not you're going to be dead. You already are. At 3 minutes and 17 seconds, the line went dead. Click. Dial tone. Biggie held the phone to his ear for another 5 seconds, listening to the dial tone. Then slowly, deliberately, he lowered the receiver and placed it back in the cradle. His hand was steady. Completely steady. No shake. No tremor. He picked up his beer, drained what was left, set the empty bottle down, leaned back in the chair, stared at the ceiling, and smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a relieved smile. Something else. Something that made Marcus's stomach drop. Something that looked like acceptance. Like recognition. Like someone who'd just received confirmation of something they'd already known but hadn't wanted to believe. Nobody spoke. The studio was completely silent. The air felt thick. Felt dangerous. Felt like the moment before something breaks. Marcus didn't know what to say. Didn't know if he should say anything. Should he ask if Biggie was okay? Should he pretend nothing happened? Should he? He's already gone. Biggie said it to the ceiling. Not to Marcus. Not to the guys on the couch. Just said it to the air. To the universe. To himself. He's already gone. Then he sat up, pulled the headphones back over his ears, and nodded at Marcus. Run that track again. From the top. Marcus stared at him. Big, maybe we should run it. Marcus ran it. The beat came through the speakers. Biggie closed his eyes and started moving his head, started getting back into the zone, started doing what he always did, making music, being the notorious B.I.G., being the king. But something had changed. Everyone in the room felt it. Something had shifted. Something had ended. They worked for another hour. Biggie recorded 3 verses, perfect takes, no mistakes, no hesitation, like the phone call never happened. But it had happened, and everybody knew it. When they finally wrapped at 4:30 a.m., Biggie stood up, stretched, grabbed his coat, said goodnight to everyone like it was a normal session, like nothing was different. Marcus watched him walk to the door, watched him pause for just a second with his hand on the doorknob, watched him look back at the phone on the desk. Then Biggie opened the door and left. Marcus never asked about the call. None of them did. It became one of those things that happened but didn't get discussed. One of those moments that lives in the space between memory and silence. But Marcus thought about it. Thought about Biggie's stillness. Thought about that smile. Thought about those 4 words. He's already gone. What did that mean? Who was already gone? Tupac? Biggie? Both of them? Was it an observation or a prophecy? Was it resignation or understanding? Was it the moment Biggie realized that the beef had moved past the point of return? That whatever was coming was inevitable? That the machine was in motion and nobody could stop it now? September 7, 1996. 6 months later, Tupac Shakur is shot 4 times in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. He dies 6 days later, September 13th. Gone, just like that. The invincible one, the warrior, the revolutionary, dead at 25. When Biggie hears the news, according to people who were there, he doesn't say anything, just gets quiet, sits down, stares at nothing. Same expression he had that night in the studio, same stillness, same absence, like he's somewhere else, somewhere nobody can reach. March 9, 1997, 6 months after Tupac, Biggie Smalls is shot 4 times in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. He dies within the hour. Gone, dead at 24. The king is dead. Long live the king. Except there is no king anymore. Just ghosts, just questions, just 2 of the greatest rappers who ever lived. Both dead before they turned 26, both killed in drive-by shootings, both murders unsolved, both lives cut short by a beef that started over nothing and ended with everything. That phone call at 2:47 a.m. in March 1996 was the last time Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls ever spoke to each other. 3 minutes and 17 seconds. One man yelling, one man silent, no resolution, no peace, no reconciliation, just anger and silence and that final statement, "You already dead, Big." And maybe Tupac was right. Maybe they both died that night. Maybe the phone call was the moment when both of them crossed a line they couldn't come back from. Maybe Biggie's silence was his acceptance of that fact. Maybe he's already gone wasn't about Tupac. Maybe it was about Christopher Wallace. About the kid from Brooklyn who'd become something bigger than himself and couldn't find his way back. The phone call happened. Multiple witnesses. The people in that studio that night never forgot it. But it's never been confirmed publicly. Biggie never mentioned it. The crew never talked about it to the press. It exists in that gray space of hip-hop history where something is known but not proven. Where the story gets whispered but never shouted. Where the truth lives in the silence between words. And maybe that's appropriate. Because the whole thing was about silence. About what wasn't said. About Biggie's choice to listen instead of fight back. About his refusal to engage. About his acceptance of something inevitable. What would have happened if Biggie had spoken? If he'd argued back? If he'd defended himself? Would it have changed anything? Would it have stopped the machine? Or would it have just been more fuel for the fire? Maybe Biggie knew that. Maybe that's why he stayed silent. Maybe he understood that there was nothing he could say that would matter. That Tupac had made his decision and no amount of talking would change it. That sometimes silence is the only honest response to chaos. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to fight. Or maybe he just didn't know what to say. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he was sad. Maybe he was all of those things. Maybe he sat there listening to someone he used to call a friend tear him apart, and he just didn't have any words left. Maybe the silence wasn't strategic. Maybe it was surrender. Maybe it was the moment Biggie realized he'd lost something he couldn't get back. Not his reputation. Not his career. Something more important. Something that used to be called friendship and had turned into something unrecognizable. The phone call lasted 3 minutes and 17 seconds. 2 men, 3,000 miles. One speaking, one silent. And when it ended, Both of them were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Or maybe they did. Maybe that's what the smile meant. Maybe that's what "he's already gone" meant. Maybe Biggie looked at that phone after it went dead and understood that the story was written, that the ending was set, that all that was left was to play out the time until the inevitable happened. And maybe that's the saddest part. Not that they died young, not that they were killed, but that they saw it coming and couldn't stop it. That they had a moment, at 2:47 in the morning in a recording studio in Manhattan, where one of them could have said something that changed everything, and instead, there was just silence, and then there was just death. The studio is still there. Hit Factory eventually moved, changed names, became something else, but the building is still standing. 6th floor, same windows, same walls. The phone that rang that night is long gone. The mixing board Marcus was sitting at got sold years ago. The leather couch got replaced. Everything physical about that moment has disappeared, but the story remains, passed down, whispered about, remembered by the people who were there and the people who heard it from the people who were there. 3 minutes and 17 seconds that nobody can prove happened but everybody knows did. Because some moments are too heavy to forget, some silences are too loud to ignore, and some phone calls change everything, even when nobody says anything at all.